What's good, everybody? So in today's video on the whiteboard, I'm going to be talking about lateral raises, one of my favorite exercises and a staple exercise when it comes to developing my shoulders. So within this video, I'm going to break down how I train lateral raises into three parts. First, going over the form of the lateral raise. How the hell do you do it? What are some cues that I've had a lot of success with, whether it be with myself in my own training or with my clients' training? And then secondly, going over some programming tidbits. How often should you be training this exercise? How often should you be training the shoulders, kind of in general? And then lastly, some final takeaways, some final considerations, and things to expect and things that you should know about when you are training the shoulders, when you are training with the lateral raise exercise. All right, so before we talk about lateral raise form, let's talk about the function of those muscle fibers. Now, it's kind of in the name, we're targeting the lateral aspect of our shoulder musculature, and that's going to be responsible for abducting the arm. So basically, we are taking our humerus, our upper arm, and we're pushing it away from our midline, away from our torso. The opposite, if we were bringing it closer, would be adduction, because you're adding together. Kind of how I like to think about it. Now, when it comes to the lateral raises, yes, you simply just raise your arm out to the side, but where you're raising is something you should consider. Now, there's something called the scapular plane. If you can see in this diagram over here, I'm gonna try to zoom in for you guys in editing, post-production angel problems. But anyways, so the scapular plane, and might sound complicated, trust me, like most things, it's not. So in this diagram, it's a top view. We can see that our lovely person here, his arm is out at roughly a 20 to 30 degree angle, and that's going to put you in that scapular plane. All that really means is that you're moving within the angle that the scapula is kind of like pointing at when you're raising out in that direction. In other words, when you're raising in this sort of 20 to 30 degree area away from that like direct midline of the frontal plane, you're going to be lining up the fibers of the lateral head a lot better with the weight itself. So you're just going to be getting more bang for your buck. That way, you're going to be emphasizing more of the lateral head than any other part of the shoulder. So lateral raises by nature are a partial movement. What I mean by that is there's no consistent point A to point B. You kind of just stop halfway up. Now, if we were to go all the way up, kind of like a jumping jack, that would be something called a Lou lateral raise. That, again, one of my favorite exercises. We can talk about that a little bit later in the video. But for the purposes of the form of lateral raises, I like to get as high as I possibly can, at bare minimum, raising towards parallel to the floor at the very least. I like to do a couple of things to, one, make sure that I'm staying in the scapular plane, but second, to also just make sure I have a smooth contraction with the weight coming up. Lateral raises are an exercise where you can easily kind of mess up, and I think that's partially due because it is a partial movement by nature. There's no consistent point A to point B, unlike a Lou lateral raise where yes, you are going all the way up into that overhead position. You're kind of just stopping somewhere in the middle with lateral raises. But nonetheless, when it comes to lateral raises, I personally like to push my hips back just a tad, so I lean forward ever so slightly. Doesn't need to be an aggressive lean. I don't need to see y'all bending over like such. Just a little hinge in the hips, very minimal, that's plenty. So with that in mind, slight hinge in the hips. I'll also like to think about keeping the movement in my elbow. So all I'm doing with my forearms and hands is just gripping the bar, the dumbbell, and letting it hang. This isn't a forearm exercise, this is a shoulder exercise. So I'm staying in the elbow, I'm raising kind of out and then away. And by doing this, you can see that I'm keeping my upper arm in that sort of 20 to 30 degree area. I'm not directly out like such. I'm trying to keep my arms far away as best as I can and letting the weight hang, but I'm also keeping the arm in that 20 to 30 degree motion. I'm probably gonna throw up a video here on the side of me doing the exercise anyways for you guys to see. I'm very visual, so I hope that helps you guys too. But in short, push your hips back and just raise kind of up and out, going away from your body. Not out directly to the side, but out and away. Okay, next up, we're gonna talk about training frequency. How often should you be doing this exercise? How often can you do this exercise? And like every coach's favorite answer, It's goal dependent. It depends. Some great questions are, well, what does it depend on? Goals, like I mentioned. Also depends on personal enjoyment. Maybe you just want to train shoulders more, and that's totally okay. To start, I like to have some type of lateral raise exercise at least once or twice a week in the program. If you're just starting out, you've never really done a lateral raise before, which I partially doubt, it's a very popular exercise, but I think 1 to 2 times a week to start is plenty. And if you want to jack up your shoulders some more and take it a step farther, consider adding in a third day. That's totally okay. Your shoulders are a very resilient muscle group. They can handle a lot of work, whether it be the front delt, the side, or especially the rear delts. They can take a lot of damage and they can recover from it pretty easily. So last tidbit on training frequency, we're going to be talking about volume and also intensity. Now, when it comes to intensity, I don't prescribe a percentage really when it comes to training like shoulders or lateral raises specifically. I will mostly keep my training within the 8 to 12 rep sort of zone, at least to start off with. I might even progress and get my reps to a point where I'm doing like 20 rep sets or 30 rep sets. I do that mostly out of enjoyment. I really just like doing high repetition stuff when it comes to my accessory work, especially something like a lateral raise where I'm just trying to milk everything I fucking can out of that set. And I don't prescribe 30 rep sets or anything like that. I achieve those higher repetitions within those sets through like a beat the books type system, through AMRAPs, just doing more reps than last week or the previous weeks on 1 or 2 or all sets while keeping the weight the same. I just made a video about double progressions, and I've made a video before in the past about some of my favorite training, not metrics, but training modalities, how to train like accessories and stuff like that. If you're interested in that video and interested in applying an exercise like the lateral raise using those mechanics, I 100% could not encourage you more to watch those videos. I use a lot of those tactics in my own programming for my athletes when it comes to training their accessories. The lateral raise being an exercise that can take a big beating. Volume-wise, you can do a lot of reps on these and be totally okay. Lastly, going to be talking about variations of the lateral raise and other programming tactics. So, like I mentioned before, lateral raises are a partial movement. If we're going to go all the way up and standardize the lateral raise, then we're going to use an exercise called the Lou raise. One of my personal favorite exercises. They're super cool, they're super fun, they're really fucking hard. And beyond just training, the lateral aspect of your shoulder does a great job at getting you to mobilize into that overhead position. But this is not a Lou raise video. We'll talk about that another time. Some other exercises that are my favorites: upright rows, chest supported upright rows with dumbbells, barbells, whatever it might be. Cables are a good one too. In other words, what I'm just telling you guys to do is change it up a little bit. We don't need to be doing lateral raises all the time. You can use a different implement. You can change it up. While I did mention training lateral raises twice a week, maybe even upwards of 3 or 4 times a week if you prefer. I've certainly done that before in the past. Not every single exercise I picked was a pure lateral raise. Might be a Lou raise, and that might be good for you if you want to standardize repetition, standardize your performance, and track it a little bit more consistently. Maybe you want to do something like a seated lateral raise, making sure that you're not cheating your reps. Get creative. You have a lot of room to tinker with this exercise and with training that muscle group in particular. Again, it's a muscle group that can handle a lot of work, so you can do a lot of different things to spice it up. And like previously mentioned, AMRAPs, rep maxes, double progression, all these things, you can do that for your lateral raises. I think it's a great way to progress the lateral raises as well. I think someone commented on my last video about double progressions, about how it's basically like a linear progression, but instead of going up in weight, you're keeping the weight the same, but just doing more reps instead. Linearly progressing through repetition. And that's exactly it. Like, that's how you want to think about it. And I think it's a good way I think it's a good methodology to employ, especially for an exercise like lateral raises, because your rate of progression with them is not going to be as great as, say, like a squat or a deadlift, or these bigger movements that recruit overall way more muscle. This will also help with just milking and getting the most out of lighter weights itself, not having to focus or worry about, oh shit, I gotta go up 5 pounds every freaking week on lateral raises. No one cares. There's gonna be a point of diminishing returns. No one cares about how heavy you can lateral raise unless you're Ken Cooper. But anyways. All right, now wrapping up the video and leaving you guys with just a few more tidbits. Something that I personally like to do with, in general, most of my accessories, but specifically for this video, training my lateral raises, I will actually take my reps beyond failure. Now, you might be wondering, what the hell does that mean? So, reps beyond failure, the way I like to categorize it, essentially, if I'm doing a movement and if I've hit failure, if it was my last rep, I literally could not have done another one to that same standard. I couldn't have gone, I couldn't have locked out or something like that. Some sort of metric that notates or denotes, like, you know, you completing the movement and completing the repetition. Then I'll opt for some partials. Lateral raises are a partial movement in and of itself. If I find that week by week, you know, I'm trying to progress through repetition in that beat the book style of training, where I'm just progressively doing more reps throughout the sets, I'll aim to increase the quality of my repetitions for sure. But if I'm at a point where it's like, all right, like I literally cannot raise this any higher, then I'll just kind of go for partials, or I'll just aim to get as high as I possibly can with my lateral raises. Instead, just getting the most out of every single set. I mentioned loo raises before. That's something I've done as well, where I'll, you know, do my loo raises for the first part of my exercise or the first part of the workout in the set, and then I'll do a mechanical drop set where I wrap up with lateral raises, usually with the same weight, directly after I finish with my loo raises. Just another example for you guys to just illustrate what I mean when I'm talking about reps beyond failure. Because of course, a loo raise is a full range of motion, and a lateral raise is just part of that range of motion. So of course I can bust out more work, more reps on lateral raises than I can loo raises. And you can take it a step farther, you know, with that beat the book style of training and just milk it for whatever it's worth. So that's something I'll do, because again, like, your shoulders can take a lot of work. They have a lot of mileage. I don't really believe there's any such thing as, you know, too much rear delt work, too much just kind of shoulder work in general. I know some people have their opinions about isolating and training the front portion of their shoulder directly. I think if you're doing a lot of bench pressing, a lot of overhead pressing, there may be less room for isolated work on the front delt. But if the need arises, then, you know, don't let arbitrary rules get in the way. You know, do what you need to do in order to progress.
Monday long, muscles jacked. Where you at? Where you at?